Okay, so today we're going to do some instrument flying in X-Plane 11.5. I'm using the Cessna 172 with the steam gauges, the very basic cockpit, because it's probably the easiest way to explain how things work. And it'll be a good lesson for other people to have a play with the Cessna. And it's the same, the Cessna in Flight Sim 2020 works the same way as the one in X-Plane. It's a pretty faithful recreation of the aircraft. So yes, we'll have a play with it and see how we get on. So I'm going to flick over to a little nav map to start preparing my flight. So I'm just tabbing across to it. So we've got a little nav map here. We've got no flight plan loaded. You can see our aircraft has spawned at Wickham Air Park, EGTB, which is just down the road from me. So we're going to right click on Wickham Air Park and set that as the departure point. So you can see that's now appeared on our flight plan. Oh, before we get as far as doing the plan, we'll just point out we have gone to the scenery library menu and made sure we have selected X-Plane 11 as against Flight Simulator. If you had Prepare 3D on here as well, I guess it would be listed as well, but I haven't. I'm also using Navigraph data. I'm not going to get into that today, but it's just a way of updating the waypoints and the frequencies and things to make sure they're up to date. So I'm going to go, and I've already connected to X-Plane, which is why you can see the aircraft lit up on the map. So I have added Wickham Air Park as my departure point. I am going to right click now on Oxford Kidlington, just a little way along the map, as our destination, so that it automatically figures out it's 11.7 miles. That's the from the top of departure. So it's worth pointing out I have loaded the performance file for the Cessna, which is why it's trying to figure out top of climb, top of departure. So top of climb is 9.8 miles into my journey, top of departure is 11.7, but that's obviously going to change because I'm going to put a couple of waypoints in. So if we zoom in, we can see there's a nav fix here, a bensou. So we'll right click on it and we will add waypoint bensou to our flight plan. So we're going to take off. We're also going to make sure, because the wind is 261 degrees in the simulator, this indicator appears in little nav map as soon as you're connected to the simulator to reflect what the aircraft is experiencing right now. So we want to change where we're taking off from as far as the flight plan is concerned. It really doesn't matter that much, but you can come into the flight plan menu and you can select a start position for departure. So we're going to choose that. I'm going to say apron ramp GA small 50 feet, and I think it's the same one where I'm actually sitting. So then we're going to scroll along the map and look at Oxford, and we want to come in on ILS if we can. So we'll choose one of these waypoints that's in the ILS feathers. So CF19 looks like a good candidate. Add waypoint CF19 to the flight plan, and it's put it in out of order. So it's getting, it's put the airport at Oxford ahead of that waypoint. So we can highlight Oxford and press Control and the down arrow on the keyboard, and it will rearrange it and move that down. So we've got both waypoints between the airports. So then that's reflected properly here. Okay. So if we go and that's our flight plan done essentially. So we could, if we wanted to, get this into the systems in the aeroplane. So we can go File, Save as an X-Plane FMS11 file. So it's automatically pointing at where I've got X-Plane installed at the FMS plans directory. I think that's because I've saved things here before. So if you can't find it, you find your X-Plane directory. Because I've got it installed via Steam, it's in Program Files, Steam, Steam Apps, Common, X-Plane 11, and then within here you can go to Output and FMS Plans, and you can save your file in here. So EGTB, EGTK, we'll have to remember that. So overwrite the one that was already there because I've done similar flights in the past. Okay, so we'll zoom out and we'll leave this on the screen because we might look at it later to see our progress. Come back into the Cessna. So we're going to program that into the GPS, that same route into the GPS system in the Cessna. But before we do that, we need to switch the avionics on. So we're just going to click on the pole for the yoke to make it disappear. We can do the same with Y on the keyboard. So what do we need to do to get the Cessna powered up? We turn on the master power, the batteries. We turn on the avionics. We can turn on the nav lights and the strobes and the beacon. And then we could just start the engine while we're sat here so we don't chew the batteries up. Okay, the engine didn't start because I didn't set the mixture to rich. So we now have the propeller whizzing round, which is good. Now we want to go and program our flight plan. Now you can see I've already got a very similar flight plan because I fly out of Booker regularly. So I would need to go to the menu page. He says, famous last words. Oh, sorry, flight plan. Menu. And then select delete flight plan and press enter. So now I've got no steps in my flight plan. So then I can, while I've not got the focus, if I press this button, it puts the focus in here to set waypoints. I don't want to do that, so I press the button again, and I do not have the focus inside the flight plan. Once I've got that set, if I click on the right hand side of the inner knob of this, there's kind of a hidden page where it shows me the FMS plans that are in that folder. So we want EGTB, so again we can press in to get the focus in there, and then we can roll the inner knob to scroll through them. We want EGTB, EGTK, which is the one we've just saved. I can press enter on that, and it has loaded that flight plan in. Okay, so what else do we need to think about? We've got two nav radios here. We're going to navigate via GPS though. So we will be using nav mode. If you remember on the Autopilot, there is a nav mode that uses the navigation radios and a nav mode that uses the GPS as well. So we're going to use the GPS setting. You'll see it once we get in the air. But before we take off, we're taking off runway 24. So we need to change the bug on the compass. So when we roll the heading knob, you can see this bug moves. So we want that to align at 240 degrees because that's the direction we'll be taking off, just to give us a visual aid as we climb out before we turn the autopilot on. Because we're going to use heading hold mode before we switch over to navigation mode, and we'll also be playing with altitude hold mode. But we can also use vertical speed mode to climb out. So we'll see all that happen on the way. Understood. Okay. So, I think we're ready to go. So I'm going to release the parking brakes and start rolling out towards the runway. I'm going to drop the flaps to flaps 1. The wind is trying to push the tail round already. The wind is coming from our left, so it's pushing the left hand side of the tail and pushing the nose right, if that makes sense. The aeroplane is trying to rotate just as it's rolling. So while we're en route, we'll have a play with the nav radios as well, just to explain how a nav radio works, and then obviously during the ILS approach into Oxford we'll see that a bit more accurately. Okay, so we can see now we are... Now this is interesting, look. We know our course. I'm just going to go and switch on the parking brake for a moment. Wait, so it doesn't roll off down the runway. Now look at our compass here. That does not reflect what we're actually doing. So we know the actual direction of the runway from looking at this is 242 degrees. So if we're looking exactly down the runway, which we more or less are, the compass is not at 242 degrees. So we can, if we push this, we want this to be, so the compass was out. Does that make sense? So on an older aircraft, without all clever whizzy systems to tell you what direction you're pointing. We can see up here at 243 degrees. The GPS was correct, the magnetic compass was wrong. So we want this to be 243 is our actual direction we're pointing. So it's about there. So we've corrected the compass to be pointing the actual direction we're pointing. Okay, off we go. So, release the parking brake, full throttle. We've already dropped the flaps to the first position. So again, I'm not having to hold against the wind now so much because airflow down the fuselage from the prop is holding the plane straight and it's taken off on its own. So I'm going to begin trimming forward straight away to stop it from climbing crazily. So there we go. It's starting to roll left slightly. So I'm going to trim the ailerons to the right slightly to hold the climb and hold them left a little. So again, I'm watching this heading bug to make sure we're more or less going still the same direction on the climb out. So let's go and say we want heading hold mode. So the autopilot now is keeping the aeroplane flying exactly this direction. We now want to say vertical speed mode, and we'll say 5, which is 500 feet a minute. So you can see the vertical speed here is settling down on 500 feet a minute. So we're watching the climb out, and we can now zoom in on the nav radio over here. Sorry, on the GPS, and we can see we're actually flying away from the vector towards the first waypoint. So we're going to switch from heading hold mode to nav mode. So if I say nav, that's radio nav mode. We don't want that. We want GPS nav mode. So I've pressed it a second time, and you can see the plane is turning right, it's banked right, and it's turning to intercept the vector to the first waypoint. So in a moment it will get to that line and it will gently turn left to meet it. So we're going to raise the flaps now, and we're going to come off the throttle a little bit because you can see where now we've raised the flaps there's less drag, so we were accelerating. So we're still climbing at 500 feet a minute. When we get to 2,500 feet we will stop climbing. Have a look outside, you can see the countryside rolling by. It's a bit of a murky day today. I've got the weather on realistic, so although it's dry outside it's not the clearest day, but that's fine. So we're busy climbing out, following the compass, following the flight plan route that we programmed in. We're not going to bother with air traffic control or anything like that today. Okay, so we have a look outside while we're waiting for the climb. So if we press shift and 4 in X-plane, we can go outside. It's a bit noisy around here. And you can see the aeroplane gently flying along. And there's the airfield we took off from. On our way. So I will go and press the key on the keyboard to take me back inside. So I've not tuned in the radios yet, so we'll have a look at those in a moment. I'll put the yoke back on while we're inside, so it looks a bit more normal. Okay, so we should start a right turn. There we go. So it's making the first turn of the flight plan. As soon as we've done that, we'll go and have a look at some of the nav radio points. So we're also coming up to 2,500 feet, so I'll get ready on the altitude hold mode to cancel the vertical speed mode. Altitude hold at 2,500 feet, so the plane is retrimming itself and it will descend back down gently until it gets to 2,500 feet, and then you'll see the vertical speed come back up to 0 again automatically. So we're not going up or down, and we're holding altitude at where we want it to. Okay, so let's go and have a look at where we are on the map. So we have flown out, this is where we were flying the runway direction, and then we switched on nav mode and we intercepted the flight plan and then came back down. So that's all looking good. Now if we just go and check that, yep, so we're joining that line. which is fine. So if we now go and have a look around and see if there's a radio beacon nearby, there is, BNN 113.75. So what we'll do on nav2, so this is the nav1 radio setting, so what you tune here will affect the nav1 radio. What you tune down here will affect the nav2 radio. So I'm going to zoom in so we can see what happens. We wanted 113.75. So if I tune in also we need to switch which one we're tuning. Oh sorry, we push this in. Pushing this knob in flicks the focus between the comm radios and the nav radios. So 113.75, doesn't it? Let's have a look. 113.75. So then we need to switch this focus, switch the frequency to be the active frequency, and this is tuned in. Now, can you notice it says 2 inside there? So as we turn the OBS knob, OBS means Omni Bearing Selector. So what this does, if I spin it round until the needle moves, you can see it says from now. Once the needle is in the middle, that means we are 250 degrees from the beacon. So if we go and check on little nav map, if we were to put a measurement in here, measure the distance to the aeroplane, well it's 254 now, we've actually moved since I said it. But from the beacon we are 254 degrees. Does that make sense? So if we spin it round, we can get the reciprocal of that, or the angle to the beacon from us. So I'm spinning this round. So 75 degrees to the beacon from us. So if we go and right click on the aeroplane, measure the distance, and put it over the beacon, 76, because we'd obviously moved, because we're measuring out quite a close distance. So there you go. We can, by using this method, you can obviously triangulate your position between multiple radio beacons, or to measure your angle to the beacon over time. Okay, so we need to tune in nav1 to be the ILS frequency, so let's go and have a look at Oxford that we're heading towards. So if we look here, the ILS for runway 19 is 108.35 and it's 191 degrees for the runway. 108.35 and 191 degrees. 108.35 is already tuned in, so that's fine. And the course we want for this was let's have a look at the exact angle of the runway. So the angle of the ILS beam was 191 degrees. I wonder if that matches the runway. Quite often they don't. No, it's 191, it does match. So what we're going to do is put 191 into the nav radio as the bearing that the beam is on. So 191, so that's 190, let's just put it just past there. So all this is really doing is aligning everything so that this gauge will give us accurate information during the approach. So let's see where we are on the map. So we're flying along 2,500 feet. We've just gone past Chalgrove, so if we look out of the left side, there's Chalgrove Airfield. It's a really murky grey day, isn't it? We're doing about 115 knots. We could even get the heading bug ready for what we know the direction of the runway is, so it was I've got that wrong, haven't I? That's 181. I want 191. Just shows you need to double check things. While I was busy talking, I'm not really looking at the gauge properly. I put 17 as the direction instead of 19. I went the wrong side of the south. Anyway, so 191. So let's move the heading bug to be on 191 as well, so we know how much we're turning. So again, make sure you go the right side. So 150, 160, 170, 180, 190. Make sense? Okay, so we're flying along. Everything's looking good. We can zoom back out of this. See where the flight plan takes us. So we're just coming up to Oxford. Just to keep ourselves busy along the way, should we have a play with the autopilot? So let's take ourselves up to 3,000 feet. So I could go to vertical speed mode and roll the mouse to take it up to +5. So we're climbing now at 500 feet a minute, and you can see that happening. We're going to descend back down to 2,500 feet before we get to the ILS. Just to show an example of where the beam will be and where we will be in relation to it. So it will pay for us to come in either too high or too low on purpose. So we're climbing at 500 feet a minute. We'll come up to, say, 2,800 feet will be enough, to be honest. So we're going to go to altitude hold mode. So the plane is retrimming itself, so it's cancelled the vertical speed. It's now dropping slightly to get back to 2,800 feet. And now it's trimming back up to level the plane. So the autopilot in the Cessna does have approach mode. You can see it here. So we'll try it out and see if it behaves. It should follow the localizer that this radio tunes into and follow it straight down to the runway. We will disable it in the closing moments of the approach and flare the plane out ourselves. So where are we on the map? So we're coming up to Oxford now. So I am going to descend to 2,000 feet before we get there. So vertical speed mode, and we want to go down at, let's go a bit steeper. We're going to go for 10, so 1,000 feet a minute, and I'm going to cut the engine so we don't accelerate too much. So I've pulled back to 50% on the throttle. We're still just getting faster, but not too badly. We're not going to stress anything too badly. So we're down to 2,500 feet. You can see we're descending. Get ready on the altitude hold again when we get to 2,000 feet. Something else we might do when we get closer is have a play with heading mode. So there we go, we're going to stop it at 2,000 feet, so the plane retrims itself. You can see that happening. Again, the vertical speed ticks back up to recover the height where it overran where we chose. Again, I'm only running at 50% throttle, remember? So you can see the speed is bleeding off, now we're level. So let's increase the throttle slightly to hold our speed. Okay, so rather than let this fly the whole thing on autopilot with the navigation mode engaged, let's go to heading hold mode. Actually, leave it on navigation for a moment, I forgot. I'm going to need to move the heading bug round to go the direction we want to be going. So I'm just rolling the mouse to turn this knob. So it's the same direction we're going now. And I'll go to heading hold mode. So now the aeroplane is following that marker on the compass. So when we get ready to do the turn, I will turn, rather than letting the plane turn itself to follow the flight plan, I will do the turn by moving the heading bug. So we can see ourselves coming up to the ILS for Kidlington. So instead of the following the flight plan, it would have flown over the waypoint, circled and come back in on the ILS beam, or on the final leg of the route, at which point we would have picked up ILS. I'm going to anticipate the turn and turn early based on just the speed we're doing. So we're just coming over Western on the green, so if we have a look outside, shift and 4. We'll look over underneath our aeroplane, and there comes Western on the green. It's just a big grass airfield. Again, I've got no add-ons on the scenery on X-Plane. This is all stock scenery. So let's go back inside. How are we doing for fuel? Got plenty. I just left the aeroplanes completely stock as it comes when you first switch it on. I didn't go and fiddle with anything. So yeah, you can leave the fuel selector in the middle on the Cessna because the fuel is in the wings. It's not being pumped up to the engine, therefore it's gravity fed. Okay, let's have a look. Where are we? So you can see now the wind, or the heading we chose, is actually slightly diverting away from the flight plan because the wind may have varied slightly, or our direction at the exact point we did it may have been slightly different. So that really doesn't make much difference to us, but we can test this. Look, if we turn this to 330 degrees, the aeroplane is turning. And we'll go back towards the vector. So I'm going to turn left now to 270 degrees to intercept the ILS beam. So we're going to roll this round to west, or 270. So we're making our left turn to 270 degrees. We're at 2,000 feet. We'll start slowing down. Again, we can zoom in on the GPS to show us the flight plan. So we're cutting the corner off basically. And you can see now we are above the glide slope has picked up the signal. We are to the left of the glide slope. So if you imagine there's the glide slope and the airport's over here, yes, we are to the left of it. So we are, for the horizontal component, the vertical needle, we are to the left. We are also slightly above. So if you imagine we were coming in 2,500 feet back here, we're not. We're at 2,000 feet at this point. Normally you'd enter the ILS at 2,500 feet. We're at 2,000 feet halfway through. So we're slightly above really where we should be. So you can see the speed is dropping off. So let's get and start on the autopilot, go for vertical speed and go for 1,000 feet a minute and let it drop to... Can you see the needle closing? As we drop, we're getting closer to the altitude we should be at. We're also going to, so we'll lessen our descent rate. We'll also start our left turn. Yeah, sorry. So we want 191 for the runway, don't we? So I'll go for 190. You can see we have now gone to the right of the line. So the aeroplane is to the right of the line. So we are to the right of the needle. But we are pretty much on the vertical needle. The horizontal needle is the vertical component of the glide slope. So we are pretty much where we should be. If we start to edge above it, we're not descending fast enough. So we can go for 500 feet a minute. We'll also change our heading slightly then to re-intercept the beam. See, I'm purposely doing this without looking out the window. Now look, the compass has gone out again, hasn't it? Did I turn the compass the wrong way earlier? We are now at 180 degrees. So I'm doing this kind of on purpose, fishtailing along the line to show you what happens, look. So if we look up, there's the runway over there. So we are to the left. So I'm going to take off the autopilot now and fly it over and intercept the beam. So we're slightly above and we're to the left. So you can, if you watch this gauge and compare it with what we can see outside as we approach, put the flaps down, which will slow us down dramatically. So we are almost on the vertical component now, and we're still, so I'll raise the nose slightly to stop us descending much faster, and we're almost on the horizontal component. The needle is coming in, meaning we're almost on the centre line. So lift slightly, and left slightly. There's a crosswind. So we've gone above the beam. So again, we're just holding that horizontal beam. We're very high. There we go. And we're now following the beam in. And at this point you would be able to see the runway, so you're just landing basically. So it was a bit messy, but I did it kind of on purpose to show you the deflection of the instruments when you're not in the centre, because the worst example you could have in the world is being dead on the centre line all the way and you don't see what the instruments do when you're not on the centre line, or not on the glide slope I should say. Okay, so obviously we can go and taxi round. So I'll raise the flaps and let's go and find our way back. The wind is really pushing us around. So there's a taxiway down the end, Oxford I think. Yeah, right at the end of the runway there's a taxiway. Really are being pushed around by that wind. It's quite blustery. So we'll just go and pull the plane up to park and then we'll finish the video. So hopefully this was interesting, just to show some of the elements of navigating. Let's go and have a drive around the airport. I'm going to leave my plane right here outside these hangars. So, get rid of the yoke, turn the parking brake on. Actually, let's go through things. So we turn off the lights, we turn off the avionics, we turn off the batteries, we can turn off the, whoops, this is not working. Cut the engine, pull the mixture back out for the next person, and we're done. So yeah, I'm going to call it a day there.